everyone, I'm Ellison Morris. You are watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. President Biden pushing his American Rescue Plan from the White House today, talking about the direct payments and emergency assistance it provides for millions of Americans.
And the message is clear. Help is here. And the bottom line is this. The American Rescue Plan is working. America is getting vaccinated. Job creation is soaring. The economy is growing, and our country is on the move again.
Meanwhile, Biden's predecessor won't be on Facebook anytime soon. An oversight board saying the tech giant was justified in banning Donald Trump after January 6th. So how's the ex-president fighting back? And it is working Women's Wednesday on News Now. Raise a pinky in the air because Shilpa Yarlagadda from Chiffon is here. Her rings fund female entrepreneurs, proving diamonds really are a girl's best friend. We start this afternoon with the president's address from the White House today. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is here. Shannon, the president's selling his plan, reminding Americans that they're getting checks and relief from this bill. What else did he touch on today?
Well, today he was talking about this restaurant program that was part of that COVID relief bill signed back in March. It has this $29 billion pool of funds for restaurants that can apply for up to $10 million in relief. Now, the restaurant industry says that's not going to be nearly enough to help this industry that's been hit so hard by the pandemic, but at least it is something, and it's a start. Here's a little bit more what the president had to say today.
The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that's what it's called, the Revitalization Fund, will provide direct relief to restaurants and to hard-hit food establishments, bars, bakeries, food stands, food trucks, and caterers. Businesses that get grants can use it to cover payroll, rent, utilities, supplies, everything they need to start, to stay open, and to reopen.
Now, the White House hopes that not only by selling this COVID relief bill that's already passed, are they going to help get credit for that, but that doing this is also going to help them get that $2 trillion infrastructure plan through. It can show people what the president has done, how it's working for them, and help build confidence that if another big stimulus bill is passed, that it could do the same.
Shannon, the Biden administration blocking a Trump-era rule. It made it easier to classify gig workers as independent contractors instead of full-blown employees. What does that do for gig workers like Uber and DoorDash drivers, for example?
Well, the Labor Department is saying that by doing this, it will, as you said, make it harder for employees to be classified as independent contractors. When they get classified as an independent contractor, that makes them harder to qualify for certain benefits like a federal minimum wage or health insurance benefits or other protections that are there for regular employees. So this is one of those steps that could push companies like Uber and DoorDash that you mentioned into having to shift a model to considering all of these contractors that they have out there now actual employees, which the Biden administration says could help workers in the long run.
All right. So bottom line, this could be a win for workers. Shannon, I have to ask you about Liz Cheney. Still a hot topic today. A reporter asked the president about all the energy that some Republicans are spending trying to get rid of her as the House conference chair. What did Biden say on this?
You know, it's interesting, and it really reflects what I've been hearing from a lot of people close to the White House and Democratic strategists. They're saying, go ahead, fight it out. This infighting in the party is not going to hurt them. Here's what the president had to say a few moments ago.
It seems as though the Republican Party is trying to identify what it stands for. And they're in the midst of significant sort of mini revolution going on in the Republican Party. I've been a Democrat for a long time. We've gone through periods where we've had internal fights and disagreements. I don't ever remember any like this. I think the Republicans are further away from trying to figure out who they are and what they stand for than I thought they would be at this point.
And meanwhile, people close to the White House say the Democratic Party is pretty unified, at least at the moment, and they are going to stay on their message, selling things like infrastructure and childcare and free community college, while they see a fractured Republican Party fighting amongst themselves.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece with the latest from the White House. Thank you so much. Who could replace Liz Cheney as the GOP conference chair? Today, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise threw his support behind New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell here now. All right, so Leanne, I got to ask, is Cheney going? Is Stefanik coming? What is going on today?
It seems increasingly clear, Allison, that Representative Liz Cheney is on her way out. Of course, there has to be a vote that is held among the Republican conference in order for her to officially lose her position. But the support she has in the Republican conference is very limited at this point. And that became extremely clear when the number 2 Republican, Steve Scalise, announced or was admitted publicly today that he is throwing his weight behind Representative Elise Stefanik to replace Cheney. Now, Cheney's office responded to Scalise saying that this is much bigger than a Republican leadership position, saying that Liz Cheney will have more to say about this in the future. But the thing is that the Cheney office is wanting to make clear that this is a choice that Republicans in the House have to make. They have to choose between willing to tell the truth to voters about the last election or continuing to perpetuate the big lie. And so that is the choice that Republicans are going to have to make next week when they are very likely expected to have to vote on if Cheney should be replaced in her leadership position. Allison.
Oh, Leanne, I have so many questions here. All right, so you said if Cheney does not step down on her own, they can have a vote. What does that process look like? Is there a way that they have to call it, how it has to go? How could this come to be?
So the details aren't totally clear yet, but we saw a version of this play out just a few months ago after the Trump impeachment, when there was the entire Republican conference had a meeting and someone brought up a motion. It was a Republican member, Dan Bishop of North Carolina, brought up a motion to remove Cheney from her position. She won that vote back in February by a margin of 2-1. So it's likely going to see the same process again next week. A member is going to have to call up a motion to remove Cheney. There will be a vote. It will most likely be a secret ballot, and the majority wins. If she doesn't get a majority of support of her conference, she will no longer be conference chair. Allison.
Leanne, you said it. There's a big question here, right, about what the future of this Republican Party is. Stefanik's a Trump loyalist. If they do vote to get Cheney out and put her in, does that sort of answer the question of where this party is going?
House Republicans are making a very clear choice of what they think the direction of the party should be, and that is embracing the former president and ignoring what happened on January 6th and ignoring the lies that he perpetuated leading up to January 6th about a stolen election. Representative Stefanik tweeted this morning after former President Trump came out in support of her, saying that she thanks him for 100% support for House GOP conference chair. We are unified and focused on firing Pelosi and winning in 2022. And that has been one of the criticism that some rank and file members and Leader McCarthy have been making about Cheney, that she is continuing to talk about this, Trump talking about a stolen election instead of focusing on 2022 and the next election. But Representative Stefanik has made a clear choice. She used to be a moderate Republican from upstate New York. And during the first Trump impeachment, she really shifted to become a big Trump supporter and ally. She defended him in that impeachment trial. And for the short term anyway, it has proven very beneficial for her.
Leanne, it's all about the Republicans and Trump today. Senator Ted Cruz tweeting a photo of his dinner with former President Trump at Mar-a-Lago last night. What do you know about that get-together?
Well, we know that Senator Cruz was willing to publicize that picture and the fact that they did have dinner. So that is one more instance where Republicans are very reluctant to move away from the former president and instead running toward him, thinking that that is politically viable. And so this is going to be a continuing debate and battle among the Republican Party and the House Republicans. It has become very clear of the path that they they are choosing, which is the path of the former president, where in the Senate it's a much more nuanced situation. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell declined to discuss or respond to what is happening in the House. He would like to move away from the president. But as you can see, Senator Ted Cruz and some of his members aren't ready to do that yet.
Yeah, you can tell from that photo, Leanne, it wasn't a quick dinner. He stuck around for a photo, and you can see a coffee on the table, so it's not like he skipped out before dessert. Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Disingenuous and misleading, a federal judge there describing former Attorney General Bill Barr. The judge ordering the DOJ to publicly release a 2019 memo that Barr used to clear former President Trump of obstruction of justice charges. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joining me now. Pete, this memo linked to special counsel Robert Mueller's report and a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. What do we need to know here?
Okay, so this is a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, a group here in Washington called CREW. After hearing the Attorney General saying that he made a decision not to prosecute the president based on, in part, a recommendation from the Office of Legal Counsel, CREW said, OK, well, we'd like to see that memo. And the Justice Department responded by saying, we have a right to withhold this memo because there's an exception under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, for pre-decisional memos. And this was giving us legal advice, and therefore we don't have to give it to you. And the judge in this ruling says, I've seen the memo. That's not what it is. She says it has two parts. The first part is sort of strategic about how to message the decision. And she said it's quite clear from context and reading the memo that the Attorney General had already decided that the president couldn't be prosecuted for obstruction of justice, and therefore the memo doesn't come under that exception, and the government has to turn it over. Now, of course, it was the Trump Justice Department that said we don't have to turn this over. Now the Biden Justice Department is going to have to decide whether to appeal this judge's ruling or not. If they don't, then the memo will become public.
All right, Pete, I have a couple of questions for you. First off, a comment from Judge Amy Berman Jackson. She wrote in her ruling, not only was the Attorney General being disingenuous then, but DOJ has been disingenuous to this court with respect to the existence of a decision-making process that should be shielded by the deliberative process privilege. Her ruling including some pretty sharp criticism of the DOJ. You have been covering the department for years. Unusual?
Yes, I think so, although it's not the first time that the Attorney General, that Attorney General has been criticized by a federal court. I have to say, the judge has really two criticisms for Barr. One is this one we were just talking about, and the one is the quote that you just showed, that she's saying that, that's not what the memo is, therefore you can't withhold it. But secondly, she's critical of Barr for saying this, that because Robert Mueller's report reached no conclusion about whether the president obstructed justice. Remember, the Attorney General said, OK, well, then it falls to me to make the decision. And I've decided that he shouldn't be prosecuted. The judge is critical of him for saying that. She says that's not the case. Why she says that isn't at all clear from reading her decision here. It may be that there's something in this memo that we haven't seen yet that would answer that question. But why she is critical of Barr for saying it fell to me to make this decision is not at all clear. I mean, the Attorney General does have the ultimate decision-making authority. In this case, Robert Mueller's recommendation is like one from a U.S. attorney, and the Attorney General would have the final decision-making there, too.
So, Pete, you mentioned it. The DOJ is now under new management. Merrick Garland has the decision to make here. Do we know when we'll have a decision from the DOJ? And do you have any sense of how he might proceed here?
I don't have any decision about what they're going to do. So this, of course, happens from time to time where one administration takes a view and then the next administration comes in and changes its mind. The sort of thing that runs through consistently is there some institutional interest that the government has here that even though they politically disagree with the Trump position, is there some institutional reason they want to fight to try to keep internal Justice Department memos from being made public? And I don't know what the answer, I don't know what that would be here, and I don't know what the answer to that question is, but they have to decide here pretty soon.
All right, we will know shortly which way they go. Pete Williams, thank you so much.
You bet.
Derek Chauvin asking for a new trial just weeks before his sentencing for killing George Floyd. Defense attorney Eric Nelson claiming misconduct by the judge, jury, and prosecutors, saying pretrial publicity denied Chauvin's right to a fair trial. Chauvin was convicted of second and third degree murder and third degree manslaughter on April 20th. The Minnesota Attorney General's office responding, the court has already rejected many of these arguments and the state will vigorously oppose them. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald has been covering the Chauvin trial for us from the very beginning. And Caroline Polisi is a federal criminal defense attorney. She's also an adjunct lecturer in law at Columbia University. Thank you both for being here. Megan, I'll start with you. There is a picture out there of one of the jurors, Brandon Mitchell, wearing a Black Lives Matter T-shirt back in 2020. During jury selection, jurors were asked if they had attended any demonstrations. Mitchell said no. What is he saying about that photo now?
So, Allison, Brandon Mitchell speaking to the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, saying that he's never gone to Washington, D.C. before, and that he attended the March on Washington, which, of course, commemorates the anniversary of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and saying that there's a myriad of reasons to why people go to that event. And it's not specific to just one thing, of course, acknowledging the fact that George Floyd's family members did speak at this event. But when he was asked about his answering no to those questions that were posed to the jury as they were doing jury selection, as it relates to if they had attended any marches or rallies, as it relates to police brutality, he said no. And he also says that he answered honestly, and he stands by his answer, Allison.
Megan, I know you also spoke with former federal prosecutor and NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. What did he tell you about that motion?
So he says that this was predictable, and so has several other legal analysts that we talked with. They said that they anticipated Derek Chauvin's defense attorney, Eric Nelson, to file this. It's typically what we see when a defendant is found guilty of their charges, to try and get a new trial. But I want you to listen to what Glenn Kirshner had to say.
These are often what I call kitchen sink motions, where they throw everything into the mix that they believe was an error during the course of the trial. These motions are rarely granted. Even though many of these issues were litigated and resolved by Judge Cahill during the course of the trial, it's because he wanted to make sure he was preserving Derek Chauvin's ability to raise them and litigate them on appeal.
And Kirshner went on to say that he believes that Eric Nelson will file an appeal with the Minnesota Appellate Court to try and get this conviction overturned. Allison?
So, Caroline, let me ask you, do you agree with Glenn here that this is a kitchen sink motion? And do you think there's any chance that it could actually spark a new trial?
I do agree with Glenn. I just make one point right off the bat, which is that Eric Nelson is doing his job, and he's doing it quite well, frankly. I mean, he probably would face an ineffective assistance claim were he not to file this motion. I think the issue is going to be something that I tell my clients about, before any trial, is that, you are entitled to a constitutional right to a fair trial, but you are not entitled to a perfect trial. And all of the issues raised in Eric Nelson's brief here are legitimate points that, were raised prior to trial and during trial that, are issues certainly that have merit. It's not a frivolous motion. But the question is whether or not that will come down to, was there, in fact, enough of an error to be reversible, really? And would in the face of all this evidence, would the decision of the jury have been different? And I don't think there's enough to get you there.
All right, Megan, Caroline, grateful for you both today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She's got the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hi, Simone.
Hey, Allison, we're going to start with this. A federal judge overturning the national eviction ban today, saying the CDC does not have the power to implement the pandemic relief measure. Now, this program was meant to protect families from being pushed out of their homes during the pandemic and was expected to extend until June 30th. The DOJ already announcing they are appealing the decision. Well, the U.S. birth rate dropping 4% last year. That's according to a new government report. That's the largest single-year decrease in nearly 50 years. The rate dropped for moms of every major race, ethnicity, and in nearly every age group. Experts saying the pandemic likely contributed to that decline. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failing to meet a crucial deadline overnight to put together a new governing coalition. Now there's a possibility that his party could be pushed into the opposition for the first time in 12 years. Israel's president is expected to give one of Netanyahu's opponents a chance to form an alternative coalition government. Well, social media calling out a Japanese coastal town for using COVID relief funds to, get this, build a statue of a giant squid. The town of Noto was given over $7 million in grants and used over $200,000 to build the statue. They say the move was part of a, quote, long-term strategy to increase tourism. All right. Well, some good news for fans of musical theater. Broadway is officially coming back this fall. The New York Theater District will open its doors starting on September 14th. Tickets, which go on sale tomorrow, will be made available at 100% theater capacity. Allison, 100% capacity. I mean, if that is not a sign that we are finally getting our lives back, I don't know what is.
So, you know, it's a great way to bring tourists back, opening up Broadway theaters. You know what's an odd way to get tourists back? Giant squids. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one, honestly. It's pretty wild.
Weird use of COVID money for sure. Simone, thank you. A triple threat of deadly storms and tornadoes leaving a mess in the South. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock shows us the damage.
A deadly trail of damage as severe weather batters the Southeast for the third day in a row. From Virginia to Mississippi, millions in the path of a spate of tornadoes and thunderstorms. Some neighborhoods so flooded, families had to be rescued by boat. This scene following flash floods in Homewood, Alabama, a suburb of Birmingham. The onslaught starting Sunday evening, so far killing one person in Tennessee and two in Georgia, including restaurant owner Scott Hudson, who'd served his community for decades.
He was just good to everybody. They don't know how to feel right now.
Tornadoes also tearing through Mississippi and Kentucky, where a massive cleanup is underway.
Knocked the whole fence down.
Knocked trees,
all those trees,
fences, everything down.
Oh my God.
Near Paducah, a pickup truck fell into a sinkhole carved out by heavy rain. And in Texas, the National Weather Service confirmed 5 tornadoes touched down Monday night, including 2 powerful EF2s.
A tornado came and took our house apart, or my parents' house. But they're safe now. We have a mighty God, because I don't know how they survived that.
Local law enforcement stepping up patrols along the U.S. southern border. The surge in migrants there stretching federal resources to the limit. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez rode along with rangers from the Texas Department of Public Safety to get a firsthand look at the crisis.
Allison, the Biden administration now says that Border Patrol processing facilities are no longer as overcrowded, but that doesn't mean the number of migrants is slowing. Law enforcement agencies here at the border say that they are overwhelmed. Overnight, the frantic flow of migrants was relentless. We were there not with federal Border Patrol agents, but with rangers from the Texas Department of Public Safety.
This is what Texas DPS agents say. They're seeing more of each and every night. Rafts full of women and children making the dangerous trek across the Rio Grande. They're saying they're having to patrol more of this area because federal resources are stretched so thin. Do you consider what you see here a crisis?
It is a crisis. It is. I mean, you see for yourself how easy it is for these smugglers to raft these migrants across. They have no fear of law enforcement because they drop them off. They'll go back to Mexico, bring another group.
Nearby in Roma, Texas, a simple traffic stop by state troopers led them to this stash house.
Right now, authorities are starting to process these migrants. It's not clear how long they had been at this stash house, but there are dozens of them, mostly young men, but a few women and children.
Since March, state officials say they've referred more than 28,000 migrants to the Federal Border Patrol. They've also seized more than 5,700 pounds of marijuana, almost 100 pounds of cocaine, and more than $1 million in currency.
We have a job to do, and our job is to protect the communities.
The Biden administration says much of this surge is seasonal and due in part to poor conditions in Central America, not a change in border policies. Recently, there's been a sharp drop in the backlog of migrant children being processed at Border Patrol facilities.
Migration is a dynamic and evolving challenge, but the president has a plan and we're working on implementing it.
But along the Rio Grande, the rafts keep coming. Paola Torres from Honduras told us she paid a smuggler $8,000 to make the treacherous journey to the U.S.
Do you see this slowing down anytime soon?
At this moment right now, I don't see it slowing down.
Critics say this isn't their job, that state and local cops should not be enforcing federal immigration laws. But Allison, we were with this group for several hours overnight, and we noticed virtually no federal Border Patrol agents there. They were just swamped.
Republicans made big gains with Latinos in 2020, and 3 months into Joe Biden's presidency, that's not changing. Just look at what's fueling GOP enthusiasm in Florida: polarizing politics in Latin America, Spanish-language conservative media, Governor Ron DeSantis' allegiance to Trump, and the Trump family's move to Mar-a-Lago. NBCNews.com reporter Carmen Cecine joins me now. Carmen, Latino Trump supporters in Florida still very active, even though he's no longer in office and he's off social media. So what does Trump support in Florida look like right now?
So while many people think of Latino Republicans as being mostly Cuban American, and while there was a shift towards Trump among Cuban Americans, where you see the biggest shift was among non-Cuban American groups, especially Colombian Americans, Venezuelan Americans, and Nicaraguan Americans. Now, here in Miami, when you speak to them, there's still a lot of enthusiasm towards Trump. And there are a lot of groups, a lot of grassroots organizations that formed months before the elections that are still active now. They meet in person, they brainstorm ideas on how to recruit more members, on how to win seats in 2022, and they're looking ahead at 2024 as well. Allison?
Carmen, one person told you we are Republican, but what we really like is what Trump promotes, using the Spanish word for strongman to describe him. What does Trump promote that they like, and how do politics back in Latin America play here?
So Latin America right now is a region that's becoming very polarized, and that's having an effect on voters here. There's a lot of back and forth with social media, with apps like Telegram, like WhatsApp. There's a lot of back and forth between relatives and friends back home and those here. So, and a great example of this is Colombia. Colombia is going through a process of intense polarization right now. They have presidential elections coming up in May 2022. That's 6 months before our midterm elections. And the candidate that's leading in the polls is a socialist. So a lot of Colombians here think that he's going to win and he's going to turn Colombia into another Venezuela. So again, it's that back and forth with family from Colombia that's fueling this conservatism here. It's making those who are conservative a little bit more radicalized, because they feel that if Democrats win, they're going to turn the United States into another Venezuela. And you see this among other groups, even Peruvians, who are a smaller group here in Florida. They had presidential elections recently, and there's a runoff coming up. The one leading those polls is, again, a socialist. And that has people here very wary. One thing about the right in Latin America is that they all see Trump as an ally in their anti-communism fight, basically. Allison?
Carmen, there's also a religious aspect to this Trump support. Could you tell us more about that?
Right. So the evangelical church in Latin America and here in the U.S. among Latinos has grown a lot in the last few years. And that's fueling a lot of the conservatism as well. I spoke to a Florida International University professor who did focus groups among Latinos. And he found that, for example, among evangelical Venezuelans, a lot of them said in focus groups that they see Trump as a chosen one, that Trump is the voice of God. So they're very supportive of Trump. And you see that also in Facebook groups. When you look at pro-Trump Facebook groups among Latinos, you see the messages, and they very often strike a religious tone when they talk about Trump. Allison?
All right, Carmen, always wonderful to see you. Thanks so much for your reporting today.
Thank you, Allison. Nice to be here.
It started with a pinky promise, a college student startup that blossomed in her dorm room. Now it is a fine jewelry phenomenon called chiffon, best known for its pinky rings, and you have probably seen them on some very famous fingers. 50% of the profits fund female entrepreneurs. Today, we are talking with Shilpa Yalakada as part of our Working Women's Week, where we're trying to help women tackle the pandemic She session together. Shilpa, we are so psyched to have you here. Thanks for being on News Now. You are a woman on a mission. You're trying to financially empower 1 million other women worldwide by 2025. You're still in college, if people can't tell by your sweatshirt, and we are in a pandemic. So what has the last year been like for you and your 3-year-old business?
Yes. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I mean, it's been, of course, such a crazy time. I was at Harvard at the time when this happened, and we were just told not to come back to campus after spring break. And, you know, it was definitely a difficult time in the sense that I was completely between Boston and New York for school. But I think that's the whole thing about entrepreneurship, and really the mission that we're supporting is these pinky rings really represent a pinky promise to pay it forward to support women. And through 50% of the profits, we're funding seed grants for female founders and for companies that empower women. And actually, during the pandemic, we were able to fund 4 new companies. So it was definitely interesting adjusting to the remote world, but I think our impact has continued. I think just from the manufacturing standpoint, it became a little bit more tricky to deal with the logistics.
I have to ask, how are you able to start helping other businesses so early in your own business? A lot of startups can't do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, like, I really started this company because I grew up in Silicon Valley and I noticed the inequities that women were facing, and that less than 2.2% of venture capital funding was even going to female founders at the time. So it was really important for me to think of a solution. And jewelry was something that, you know, I just grew up loving, especially due to my culture. And when I realized that the margins could actually be put to something really impactful, I started to think of how we could really make that difference. And, you know, it's less about like how much you're giving away versus the intention and the mission. I think, you know, you can't just think about impact once you're successful. I think you have to really think about it from the beginning so it can grow with your success. So in our first year in the business, we were only able to support 2 startups and the grants were much smaller, but over time that has really grown and been a really integral part of why we exist.
Hey, even 2 grants, 2 small grants are better than nothing. That's awesome. So let me ask, how did you get started and get this off the ground? And what advice do you have for other women who are trying to launch something of their own, but maybe they're thinking, it's the pandemic, this isn't the right time, or I don't have enough money, or I haven't raised any funding and that's impossible to do?
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, I actually think like when this business started, it was in some ways similar to the pandemic. I actually was dealing with a concussion and recovering from that. So I was actually just at home. And, you know, I think so often we feel this pressure to always have to seek more knowledge, to act on more things. But I think we're surrounded by so much inspiration already. You know, there's so much we can already do with what we know. And I think Chiffon was really created because I was putting together a lot of my passions and a lot of my ideas to see how they could work together. And I think, you know, it could start with just a Google search. That's really how I did it. I just Googled, how do you make jewelry? I didn't know anything about it. And I think, you know, it was completely different than what I was majoring in. And my best advice would be like, Google things, do your research, but also find mentors. I think, you know, mentorship is such a beautiful thing to pay it forward. It's such a part of our mission and who we are, and something we're now trying to do in how we support other businesses. But it was really our early mentors who were celebrity stylists, who really understood fashion and luxury, that, you know, really positioned us to succeed in this industry, because that was knowledge we couldn't Google. So I think surround yourself with people who believe in you and that can teach you something new.
I love this. I Googled jewelry making in the pandemic and ended up making things for friends and family that they wear just to be nice to me. You Googled it and launched an entire business, one that also funds other women. I'm so impressed. All right, so I have to ask, how did Michelle Obama and Serena Williams start wearing your rings? Oh, and then Emma Watson and Nicole Kidman and Idina Menzel and Cynthia Erivo. I mean, you have some really huge stars rocking your jewelry.
Definitely. I mean, so much of it was organic. Like, I mean, I literally just wear these all the time, and so do all my friends. And I think so much of the time we would just find ourselves in a room, and it would either be me or somebody else on the team, and we'd directly pitch them, or sometimes it was through the stylist. I remember one of the girls on our team and I, we just went to New York right after our final exams in 2018, and we actually met Meredith Koop, who's one of our mentors now, and like little did we know that the next day we would just see Michelle Obama wearing the ring, and Jenny Wang from our team at the time just happened to meet Serena Williams, and as a result just pitched it to her. She wore it, she loved it, so it's just been really organic, and we can just really quickly explain the impact that we're making through our pinky and the promise.
It's so awesome. I'm looking at these images and thinking you must have just died seeing those women in those big moments wearing your jewelry. I know you also partnered with Michelle Obama's When We All Vote in 2020. You designed limited edition hoop earrings that benefited her nonprofit. And I understand you're working on another jewelry campaign. Tell us about that.
Yes, I mean, so it was such a dream to be able to work with When We All Vote. And, I'm actually wearing these new products now that were really inspired by the earrings that we made with her team, because, these hoops represent all of the hoops that women have jumped through. And it was really around the difficulties women, had to even get their right to vote. But I think, so much of that is true for women now in the process of building a company in terms of how we can achieve success. So these are funding startups led by women, and we're having 19.65% of the profits fund this, because 1965 was the year all women finally had the right to vote, including women of color. So we're really excited for the hoops, and we'll be seeing more of them soon.
Shilpa, so awesome to have you on here. Your jewelry is fantastic. And look, you're just showing women that they can do a Google search and launch their dreams too. You just have to start simply and keep the faith. Thanks so much for being part of our Working Women's Week. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we have an incredible lineup of female entrepreneurs and experts all week long. You can catch our Working Women's Week right here on News Now from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Peloton is recalling all of its treadmills after a child died and dozens of other kids were injured. The company telling customers to stop using the Tread and Tread Plus immediately. Peloton stock dropping nearly 15% on the news today. NBC News business reporter Letitia Miranda joins me now. Letitia, the Consumer Product Safety Commission warning people to stop using these treadmills last month. Why did Peloton wait till now to recall them?
Well, we would have to be in the boardroom to really know the answer to that question. But they were aware of these issues a while back. Back in April, the CPSC said received about 39 reports of incidents of children being harmed by these treadmills. Sorry. So they received these incidents that children had gotten abrasions. They had been pulled under the treadmill as it was working. And they also received a report of one death. Okay. And so that really raised alarms there at the CPSC. And Peloton said, you know what, we think that this accusation that these products are harmful is misleading and inaccurate. And then they engaged in some negotiations with the CPSC to finally say, you know what, I think it's safer for consumers that they know that that these treadmills come with risks and could be really harmful and even deadly for small children.
Peloton CEO is apologizing. What is he saying to customers about all this?
Yeah, so he apologized that they didn't react quicker earlier. And the company is now telling anybody who has bought a treadmill or a Tread Plus to contact the company for a refund. And they are also, they're saying don't use these. And they're offering consumers still some exercise content online, but, exercises you can do without one of these products.
All right. Scary news to hear for sure. And good advice for folks not to use those anymore and send them back. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Former President Trump won't be back on FaceTime anytime soon. The social network's quasi-independent oversight board keeping the ban on his account, saying Facebook was justified in suspending Mr. Trump after the Capitol riot, but the company needs to reassess its decision to ban him indefinitely. Trump firing back, of course, in a statement saying what Facebook, Twitter, and Google have done is a total disgrace and an embarrassment to our country. Free speech has been taken away from the President of the United States because the radical left lunatics are afraid of the truth. NBC News senior media reporter Dylan Byers joining me now. Dylan, the board keeping that ban for now, but they're certainly opening the door for Trump to come back, saying it's not permissible for Facebook to keep a user off the platform for an undefined period. Did the board make any other recommendations here, and who handles this now?
Yeah, well, I would say even more than the board keeping the door open for Trump to come back, they're just putting the ball back in Facebook's court on this decision. And you know, the reason this oversight board exists, you called it quasi-independent. That's the right way to think about it. This board exists because Facebook willed it into existence, because it said, look, we shouldn't be making the really tough decisions about what can and cannot appear on a platform that's used by some 2 billion people. So let's create an independent oversight board that can help us make those tough decisions. The board's saying, look, you can't shirk responsibility on this. You have to come up with clear sort of rules and guidelines by which any user, political leader or otherwise, could understand what might happen to their account if they did something like what Trump did. And so, yes, the door is open for Trump to come back. But the bigger question now is Facebook can't shirk responsibility on this. They have to make that decision themselves.
So on that note, let me ask you, Facebook responded to this decision writing, "We're pleased the board has recognized that the unprecedented circumstances justified the exceptional measure we took." But Dylan, both the board and Facebook acknowledged this was an exceptional measure. But let's be honest, right? Some of these unprecedented circumstances are becoming more common these days. How far off are we from a specific set of Facebook rules for world leaders or other public figures? It seems like Facebook has really been hesitant to do that, but could this force their hand?
Yeah, a little bit. And you know, I would also say circumstances force their hand. I mean, I think when Mark Zuckerberg was sitting in his dorm room at Harvard, he was not anticipating, obviously, nor was he anticipating as recently as a few years ago that Facebook would even have to come up with a policy for this. And I think Trump and other sort of controversial leaders around the world have forced Facebook to reckon more seriously with putting policies like this in place. We all remember the circumstances of the election and the buildup to the inauguration and, of course, the events of January 6th. Facebook had to make decisions here in real time. And I think the board is saying that in that moment, Facebook did make the right decision. Now the time has come to put some policies in place that aren't so ad hoc, that aren't just sort of kind of arbitrary and temporary, but rather clear rules that govern what happens when you have a situation like what happened with President Trump on January 6th. So that's a long-winded way, Allison, of saying, yes, I do think Facebook is going to start to put some more concrete policies in place that might help them understand what to do should this come about again, not just in the United States, but in any country.
Dylan, it's not long-winded at all. You gave us great context. I mean, I think we all really forget that Facebook, you know, we know how Facebook started, but we've come a really long way since then. I mean, I think if someone walked into Zuckerberg's dorm room and said, someday Donald Trump is going to become president and you're going to have to ban him from your platform after there's an insurrection at the Capitol, he would have told that guy, "You're high, get out of my dorm room." So it's just good to put it into context and realize how far they've come and how much has changed. Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was talking about this on Fox News this morning. Here he is.
This is a sad day for America, but a sadder day for the Facebooks of the world who have actually enjoyed a very wild, wild west kind of regulatory environment. I can tell you that's going to change. The discussion will happen within hours of this decision on Capitol Hill, just a few blocks from where I am.
So, Dylan, how could this decision affect the likes of Twitter and Google? And do you expect Congress to step in here? I mean, we know they've been questioning the tech giants. They've been considering cracking down on them for some time now. Do you anticipate a move from lawmakers?
Well, the first thing I would say is any response you see from Republicans, or particularly from Trump world, is often geared more towards the rhetoric to sort of, gin up support among the base. That fundamentally doesn't characterize this issue the right way, nor is it even clear that they understand what's going on here. What I do expect is that Congress will continue to make a lot of noise about regulating the tech giants, and that they, for issues both of partisanship and their own sort of inability to really wrap their hands around this issue, will fail to bring forth anything that could apply to Facebook in the United States, let alone around the world. And the fact that the oversight board came into existence in the first place is because there was no government or regulatory answer to fix this problem. And so what Facebook put forward was not an ideal solution, but it was the best. It is the best solution we've seen so far. And so my anticipation, Allison, is to say Congress will make a lot of noise about this. Republicans certainly will cry foul, cry free speech and censorship and all that. I don't expect much to change substantively out of Washington on this issue for quite some time.
All right, so we'll see what Facebook's next move is. Dylan, thank you.
Thank you.
Women make up just 30% of all elected officials in the U.S., according to the Center for American Women in Politics. But some trailblazing politicians are jumping in to change that. NBC News Capitol Hill producer Julie Sorkin introduces us to a new wave of female politicians in Pennsylvania.
Exact words my husband said when we went to the House floor the first time. He said, "Where's all the women?"
Women make up just 30% of all elected officials in the U.S. However, times are changing. 2 women behind the president for the very first time during a joint address. While that's a big leap, many think it's the smaller steps that'll create the greatest change.
I was running in a district that had not been represented by a woman in 30 years and by a Democrat in 40 years.
Incomes Emerge, an organization that began 2 decades ago to help Democratic women that have never held office run and win.
I needed to learn how to campaign, I needed to learn how to fundraise, and I needed to learn how to turn my passion into a political campaign.
Tina Davis and Mary Jo Daley, both serving in Harrisburg, started Emerge PA just before the 2016 election. They said something was missing when they looked around their state capital.
The makeup of the House right now is different because there are more women, and the difference is that the conversation is different. We talk about things like childcare, we talk about equal pay, we talk about gender equity, we talk about paid time off. We actually talk about those things, which is, it's a big change.
Just a few years ago, Pennsylvania was ranked 49th in the country for the number of women in elected positions. The battleground state flipped by Trump in 2016 and then back blue by Biden in 2020, emblematic of the progressive women entering local races that have gone unchallenged for decades.
I was the little engine that could. No one thought I would win. The seat that I flipped had been held by a Republican for forever, and I won with hustle and boots on the ground.
Representative Mary Gay Scanlon was part of the wave of women elected to Congress in 2018, when a historic 255 women ran for office in both parties. Can you describe how it felt that day?
Oh, it was really exciting because at that time, Pennsylvania had the largest congressional delegation with no women in it. There were 18 congressmen and 2 senators, all men, and by getting sworn early, I got to break through that. So we have this great image that we took that day. I'm there in a bright blue dress, surrounded by these guys in dark suits. I did call them my brethren. It made them laugh.
When running for office, women face challenges men never even have to think about.
After a debate, a group of people walked up to me and they said, "Shivanya, we really appreciated your answers. You know exactly what you're talking about. However, we don't like your jacket color, so we're not sure if we're going to vote for you."
For the 150 successful women Emerge trained, it became less about style and more about substance.
Many of us are the head of household of our own family, no matter what that family looks like. And having that kind of laser focus on what actually life is like for people makes us better leaders, makes us better voters, it makes us more active.
These women are far from so-called career politicians. Instead, they're using their work experience to change the status quo in their communities. Maria Collette was a trauma nurse before she ran for state senate in 2018.
I had never run for office before. I had never even thought about running for office before. I had no idea that this skill would suddenly become useful. But being a nurse has allowed me to go to vaccine clinics all around Montgomery County, where I represent people, and administer COVID vaccines.
And Joanna McClinton, the first woman in PA elected leader of either party, was an attorney.
It's exciting to know that I'm not just bringing my law practice as a former public defender and my passion for criminal justice, but I'm also bringing my outlook as a woman and being able to say what many women across Pennsylvania are facing.
How do you keep the progress going once you're in office at every level of government?
I think making sure that you're surrounded by people that are going to amplify the message, increase public awareness about the issues is really, really important. You still need to mobilize after you've won.
We recruit other women, and we steer promising women candidates.
And passing these lessons on to the next generation.
How important is it for you to know what's going on in your government?
Very important. I really like the way that women stand up for the country.
With each generation building on the last.
Do you want to be elected yourself one day? Do you want to be in government?
Yes.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.